those CDs. We want to look at them. We all know we have a couple of guests here from India who have come all that way. And one of them is my friend Bardhan Chandar, who's sitting right here. And he is requested 10 minutes to just talk with you a little bit. And Charles has graciously said that would be okay before he gives his keynote speech. Bardhan Chandar is from Chennai, India. And that's the center of a phenomena that is sweeping India. And it's moving around the world, past India as well. And the phenomena is Swami Chaturvedi. Swami Chaturvedi is an extraordinary person. I was there in January with their Grand Global Peace Meet, and he has a phenomenal mind and a phenomenal compassion for all of humanity. The saying of Ramanuja Mission Trust is "Let none suffer," and they're serious about that. They want a world where none suffer. So I'm very pleased. He says you'll be 10 minutes, and I think you'll find it very, very worthwhile to hear him talk to us. Thank you. Please come up.
Good evening. It's my privilege to be standing before you representing Chaturvedi Swami and stand here to strengthen the hands of all of you who stand for one single world government which can resolve most of the agonies and miseries which humanity today has been facing. And the time is very ripe for us to be able to reach the takeoff stage. In fact, when the Wright brothers were inventing the aeroplane, it was not an overnight achievement, but it was the culmination of 1,000 years of dreams and aspirations of humanity, looking at all the birds. When are we going to be flying like this? When are we going to be flying like this? The dream and the aspirations of humanity of 1,000 years had finally culminated at the right time, by the blessings and endorsement of the Lord, who is the universal controlling power. Call him by any name. Similarly, the culmination of humanity's aspirations for one single government which controls uniformly, equitably, all the economic resources of the world and distributes in a very fair and just manner. The culmination of the dreams and aspirations of thousands of years of humanity for equitable justice, fair play, and political administration, I believe, is the type of institution that we are now conceiving and we are now proposing to the world. What is our constituency? Why we should be having it? All of us are aware, the world is aware, there is a strong sense of disillusionment and disappointment with the way the governments across the countries have been running. So much of violence, so much of agony, so much of inequality, so much of injustice. How long we should be tolerating it? Why should we be tolerating it? And who is accountable for all the negative results that we are having? Who is answering? The so-called League of Nations, the so-called United Nations, have they delivered? Are they in a position to say, yes, we have the solution, come on? The type of discontent that is prevailing today is manifested not in the governments that we have, not in the power and authority that people are holding, not in the influence that they are holding, because all of them are being backseat driven by vested interests. We know them very well. The greed, the selfishness, the lust for control of power, authority and influence. The small segment of humanity which has a vested interest in perpetuation of the status quo has been having different forms and continuing the governments. And the national governments also have a very narrow outlook. The boundaries of nations are man-made. Look at it from the creator's point of view. I create and I give everything to you. and you create your own artificial boundaries of nations, and you also call them national interests, and then you want to protect those interests, and you amass everything and possess everything, and starve so many others. Will the Creator be happy about it? How long will He be tolerating it? The wish and the desire of the higher powers which are controlling the universe, I believe, are manifesting in terms of their descended influence, descended thought forms to put all of us together to seek a change. And we are not alone, please. Let's know strength. All the nations have got very narrow national interests, and they are governed by that, they are controlled by that, thanks to the nationalistic and other type of boundaries that they have created, artificial boundaries and artificial self-interest. Whereas the non-governmental institutions who are expressing their desire for change are a huge number. And that is our constituency. And they are extremely discontented, they are seeking change, they are asking for an alternate form. They want a choice how they can seek a change. And they are the people who have whole, in fact, humanity in mind. Talk about the NGOs who are working in the field of disarmament. They don't work for one nation, they are working for the mankind. The NGOs working for environment conservation. They are asking for change in the mankind. The NGOs working in the field of energy conservation, energy optimization. They are working for the entire benefit of mankind. The people who are working for human rights, working to people, the religious groups, the enlightened religious groups, all of them are our constituencies. All that we need to do from here, I believe, is to understand that the right stage has come. Nowhere else in the world, no time earlier, but the time so ripe as today. What was considered impossible of a global government, global constitution, the world government has now become possible. Economic globalization is possible, then political globalization is also possible. Let us park all the nationalistic or the country-based opinions aside and merge as one single mankind, one single this. Let none suffer, let justice be available for all. And the type of revolutions, the developments that have happened in transportation, communication, and contact, in terms of various developments which have taken place in the recent years, is making all the more possible for us to reach across with the large constituency of people, gather all of them, offer ours as the viable political model for them to adopt, and ignore the current various state governments, or the countries' governments, and the United Nations for that matter, which is never going to reform, which is never going to, it has become most irrelevant. The challenge now lies with the UN to make itself relevant for the future generation. I think we should park them aside and parallelly build a consolidated, confederated NGOs who are now going to support us and use media and youth as a very strong force. Music, yoga, some of the supporting tools to be able to mobilize and rally all the people and see success very, very soon. With this positive message for all of us, I thank all of you for the opportunity that we are given, and we would like to work very closely with each one of you to be able to achieve the tangible results very soon in the coming future. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Here we go. Okay. Now it's really loud. We're having an energy roller coaster, aren't we? Yeah, it's kind of weird. Okay. So now, let me introduce our keynote speaker who split his weekend to come here. He was at another conference in Raleigh, right? Oh. All right, well, that's what I was told. Okay. Anyway, he's here now, and we're very happy to have him. It's Charles Eisenstein. He was on the panel this afternoon. And it's hard to sum up Mr. Eisenstein because he's a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I put him down as a social entrepreneur, and he went, no. He didn't like that. So we are going to describe him as an author and a commentator, and someone who is taking, I think Ken Wilber would say, a unique quadrant view, the we quadrant view of what's going on in the world. He's written amazing books called The Ascent of Humanity and Sacred Economics, and The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. He has been described as one of the 25 intelligent optimists by Ode magazine. And we are just really, really pleased he's here today because he has a new son who almost made the journey, I believe. So we are very pleased you're here, sir. And please take us on another energy trip. Let's see where this goes.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm just feeling, wow, this thing's powerful, isn't it? I'm feeling just thankful and wondering where to direct my gratitude besides toward Laura and Barbara and the organizers. And I guess I'm feeling thankful toward this being that has drawn us all together and that has called the organizers into service, and that's calling all of us into service. I don't think anyone really knows exactly what this being is. Anytime we declare movement, we risk trying to enclose this being inside our existing concepts, but really it's bigger than any of our existing concepts, because it's really something new, the new world that we're building or that we are co-creating, which doesn't mean just co-creating with each other. I'm sure Barbara would affirm that, right? It also means co-creating with that which is beyond human beings, with the organizing intelligence of the cosmos, even. And I think that all of us, we catch a glimpse of, my name for it is The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. Because my mind doesn't always know that it's possible. My mind kind of goes back and forth and thinks that I'm crazy sometimes. One reason we're here together is that we can remind each other that we're not crazy, or at least we're all crazy together. But I call it The More Beautiful World My Heart Knows Is Possible, and maybe you have another name for it. And maybe we each get like a little glimpse of this thing emerging through the fog, and like a jewel. And occasionally there's a sparkle. That sparkle takes the form of some event in your life, or some encounter, or some magical incident, or some deep experience of intimacy that says to you, you were right. This is how the world is supposed to be. This is a glimpse of something real, not a fantasy or an excursion away from drab normality, but a glimpse of the future. And so we all get these different glimpses of it that affirm the knowledge that we're born with. And then we get together and we share these glimpses with each other and hold each other in the knowing that we're stepping into, that we're born with. Like, I remember very well when I was a teenager even, or even younger, sitting in school and thinking, it's not supposed to be this way. Everybody's telling me that a good boy plays by these rules and excels and seeks the rewards of the system, but I know it's not supposed to be this way. I'm not supposed to hate Monday. But that's considered quite normal, like thank God it's Friday, right? Like that's so normal as to be almost unquestioned. And there was a little lonely part of me that said it's not supposed to be this way. You're not supposed to raise your hand to go to the bathroom, and you're not supposed to feel this exhilarating sensation of freedom on the last day of school, accompanied by that dread, that foreboding that school's going to start again next semester. And then you've practiced for years and years, conditioning yourself to, no, don't do that. I can't see people's faces and stuff. I like to see the faces. Yeah. All right. Okay. And just like living the life that I'm bribed to live, or that I'm coerced into living, and we practice that in school for a life in the money economy. That's pretty much the same. Doing things that, and I'm probably very few people in the room are actually in this position anymore, but maybe we still feel the pressure to do things you don't care about for the sake of external rewards, first grades, then money. And so there was a part of me that said, no, it's not supposed to be this way. And I felt a wrongness in the world that was so pervasive that it seemed like reality itself. And I thought, well, maybe something's wrong with me. Maybe the wrongness in the world is just a wrongness in myself. I didn't have I couldn't articulate what the wrongness was. But it was a strong enough feeling that I couldn't wholeheartedly participate in what was offered to me as normal. And I became, over the years, as I discovered more and more deeply how pervasive this wrongness was, as I learned about economic globalization and colonialism and the environmental crisis, and my knowledge expanded. And the wrongness seemed more and more all-encompassing. I became kind of obsessed with identifying what the source of the wrongness was. And I tried different candidates, Maybe it was capitalism, patriarchy, racism, greed, ego, looking in the spiritual dimension. What is the source of the wrongness? And eventually, I came to an answer that satisfied me, but the answer was so deep that I recognized that it wasn't actually a wrongness, but it was part of a larger process. And the name I gave to it was separation, which is really a story. Part of our story, okay, so every culture has a story. I call it maybe the story of the people, or the story of the world, and it accompanies a story of the self. Every culture has a story that tells us who we are, what it is to be human, how change happens in the world, what's real, what's important, where we came from, where we're going. It's a mythology. Every culture has one. And ours says, see, I've said this phrase so many times that I'm thinking it's kind of not fresh anymore. I don't want to just quote myself. Okay, thank you. I was just asking permission to do that. It says, so it answers the question, who are you? By saying, who you are is a separate self in a world of other. And the world outside yourself, and there's a whole bunch of other separate selves that if you're religious, you say they're a soul encased in flesh. If you are scientific, it's maybe a mind inside, generated by a brain inside of a body, or it's a consciousness looking out at the world, or it's a biological machine programmed by your genes to maximize reproductive self-interest. You're a bubble of psychology in a world that doesn't have the qualities of a self. This story says the world outside of ourselves is composed of things that are not like we are. Maybe animals are a little bit like we are, and plants to some rudimentary extent, but not rocks, not mountains, not rivers, not the planet, not the sun, not the wind, not the clouds, not this thing that we serve, this more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. That's just, in the old story, that's just a poetic metaphor. That's just a rhetorical device. And when I give thanks to that, I'm just waxing poetic. But I'm not actually thanking a real being that has a purpose, agency, consciousness, and desire. The old story that we have lived in for many, many generations says that we are alone in the universe, that any meaning or purpose or truth out there is a projection of these human qualities onto dead matter. There's no purpose in the world outside of ourselves, nothing to serve. So it fits hand in hand with the economic ideology that says that the purpose of life is to maximize rational self-interest. That's our fundamental motivation. All of these things go together. It also goes along with what I was talking about this afternoon, with the paradigm of control. Because if the world is separate from us and the forces of nature are completely indifferent to human well-being or to human purpose, or don't have any organic intelligence of their own, then our well-being comes in protecting ourselves against and insulating ourselves from these hostile or indifferent forces. So well-being comes through control, and the mythology says that human history is an ascent out of a primitive state of nature toward more and more mastery, domination, and control of the world. And it says that utopia will come when our control over reality is complete, when we've mastered it with maybe nanotechnology or genetic engineering. The fashionable candidate for the final technology, the final solution, changes with time. It used to be the steam engine. Then it was electricity, and then atomic power, and chemistry, and so on and so forth, pesticides. And it's always just one little invention away. And then we're going to finally achieve utopia. That's the old story. It's, Leah was taught she was in between the songs. No, it was in one of the songs. No, in between. She was saying, paradise is just this close.
So it's here.
Right in front of our face. Yeah. Hmm? Right here. Right here. Not one more invention away. The cover image of my first book, The Ascent of Humanity, is a picture of the Tower of Babel, a 16th century painting, which is a kind of a metaphor for this idea that paradise is up there some way, and if we only build a high enough tower, we will reach it sometime. So we build and we build and we build. And then we pause, we look up from the tower, and we say, oh, look, we're no closer to the sky yet. That means we must build even more. And we build and we build and we pour all of our resources into building. And then again, we look up and the sky is just as far away. What is happening today? This effort is running out of steam. And we're beginning to look around and say, wait a minute, where does the sky begin actually? The sky begins an inch off the ground. And so this is part of what is pushing us into, I like to call it a space between stories. The story that's carried us, the story of self and the story of the world, isn't working anymore. When I was a kid, it was just this kind of vague knowledge, this unease that said, what's been offered to me as normal isn't the real normal. And that unease kind of kept me half in and half out, like I didn't drop out of school. I kind of went along with the program, not really knowing the alternatives. But now I see, including my own kids, like many, many young people who I'll tell you a story. This happened about 10,000 years ago. Yeah. Sorry. Maybe it happened 20,000 years ago, or maybe it happened outside of time altogether. But humanity got together and formed a council. Who knows how they did it? Maybe communicating through dream. They got together and formed a council, and they said, we are in a really beautiful place right now. But we know that there is a place that we want to go. We can see it on the horizon. We see it as this golden light. And to get there, we're going to have to leave behind the beautiful place that we're at. And we're going to have to go on a journey. And we understand that this journey is going to take us through the most horrific territory imaginable. The most horrible thing that you can imagine a human being doing to another human being, that's going to happen. And things beyond your imagination. But we're going to go on this journey because that's the only way to arrive at the destination, which is actually just where we are now, but enriched by the whole journey. So we went on this journey of the journey of separation. And it began, because when I researched what's the origin of the wrongness, I went back, was it industry? Was the Industrial Revolution that was glorified in my education? Was that just a big mistake? Then there's radical writers who say, no, actually agriculture was the big mistake. Because we tamed nature, we made nature ours, we enslaved animals and plants, we became masters, we exercised dominion over nature. That was the mistake, that's the root of the wrongness. And then other, even more radical writers say, even agriculture is built on a deeper foundation of separation, the labeling of the world, the imposition of representational language, naming things, categorizing things. And that's the origin of oppression. When I categorize, a group of people with, a racial or an ethnic category, that makes them less than fully unique divine human beings. When we do that to the world, when we call it a tree or a rock or, any noun, then it becomes one of a category, and that allows us to exploit it. Well, how far back do you want to take it? So I took it that's already like, are we going to do away with representational language and all that comes with it? Shakespeare, poetry, music. Well, actually, music came before language, but what about fire? And that creates the first division between the domestic realm and the wild. That's our first tool of conquest. Well, what about stone tools? So I took it, I'm like, okay, if it goes back that far, this couldn't be a mistake. Because no being in nature receives gifts that are superfluous or unnecessary. Humanity included. So it raised in me the question, this gift of technology and culture, of our hands and our minds, what is it for? What is its evolutionary purpose? So I understood, this separation is part of a larger process whereby we come back to a reunion that encompasses and includes and integrates the entire journey. So we have the age of stone, 3 million years, the age of fire, a few 100,000 years, the age of representational language, tens of thousands of years, agriculture a few thousand years, industry a few hundred years, the information age a few dozen years, telescoping into a transition point that is qualitatively larger, qualitatively bigger, deeper than anything that's gone before it, even the Neolithic Revolution. So we've gone on this journey and gone through all of this territory. And now, I told this story to a young woman. Humanity going on this journey, and we come to a cliff, and the golden land is on top of the cliff. And how do we climb it? The only way is to climb one person on top of another on top of another. The people on the bottom hunkering down, the next climbing on their shoulders, one generation after the next, until the ones on the bottom turn into stones. The grandfathers climbing up and up, each reaching as far as they can, and like my parents, growing up in the 40s and 50s, and to them, in their age, like the idea that a woman was just as capable as a man, that was like this huge revelation. The idea that a black person was as smart as a white person, that was like this radical thing, that gradually was bringing the marginalized, excluded other into the fold of selfhood. So the dehumanization. Women, racial minorities, and other excluded people are gradually being brought into full beingness, and that they took it as far as they took it. In each generation now we're extending that inclusion beyond just people. And that's why I call it a new and ancient story. I'll finish the story in a minute. But here I have a rock. What is it like to be this rock? What is it like to be this rock right now? Here it is, yeah. That question makes sense to you, doesn't it? That question makes sense to any child. But as we grow up, we typically, at least if we're educated, we say, it's not like anything to be this rock. This rock is just, a mixture of whatever minerals, and those are composed of protons, neutrons, and electrons. It's just a bunch of stuff. And you're projecting beingness. It's called anthropomorphic projection. And the child says, oh, my teddy bear is tired, my dolly is hungry, But when we understand that, it's not rest, it's a bunch of fluff, it's just a bunch of stuff. It's not really hungry or tired. That's what a child projects onto reality. By the same logic, to say that a river or a lake or a forest or a planet deserves to live, deserves to flourish, deserves to fulfill its purpose, can suffer. By the same logic, that is a projection as well. It's irrational and it's unscientific, which is why the environmental movement doesn't use those arguments. Instead, when they say, well, why should you care about climate change? Why should you care about biodiversity? They say, well, because if you don't care about it, if we don't protect these ecosystems, if we don't conserve natural resources, then we're going to be doomed too. In other words, care about the rivers, the soil, the planet, because of its value to you. Well, what if I said, why should I take care of my kids? And you said, well, Charles, if you don't, then there'll be no one to take care of you in your old age. Or if you don't, you'll get arrested for child neglect. Oh, okay. Like, there's something missing from that, isn't there? And if that's my only motivation, how well am I going to take care of my kids? Only well enough to gain the benefits. that's not good enough. And the level of commitment and service that we need right now for our planet to make this transition does not come from fear, does not come from self-preservation. That motivation isn't good enough. That motivation brings us into the mindset of self-preservation and maximizing self-interest. And usually what that means is out-competing everybody else and making more money. That's what that mindset brings us to, which is counterproductive when it comes to healing the damage that has been done to the planet. So the core of the revolution then is not to more cleverly use the Earth's, quote, resources. It's not even to understand that we are interdependent on nature. It's to see all beings as beings, and to understand, and that starts with human beings, it starts with the human beings that we've dehumanized, but it extends beyond that. And that is not only a new story, it's also an ancient story. That's how everybody saw the world. Not only does it make sense to a child to ask, what is it like to be this rock? It also makes sense to an indigenous person. So the dominant story says, yeah, the indigenous people, they're kind of like children too, because they haven't developed science yet. And I became very suspicious of this. It's kind of like, you could call it ontological imperialism, which says not only do we know how to live better than you, and therefore you should develop and become like us, but we also understand the nature of reality better than you. We know how to acquire knowledge better than you do. Our system of knowledge is better than yours. Our understanding of reality is superior to yours, and you should become like us. I became suspicious because of this close parallelism. That was pretty believable, though, maybe 50 years ago, when our civilization was on the rise, and it was one triumph after another, conquering one disease after another. The visions of the future we had in the 60s and 70s, the space colonies, the robot servants, the infinite lifespans, and all that kind of stuff. And we were going to pave over the earth. We were going to conquer the insects and have artificial pollination and synthetic food and everything. And there was nothing that science couldn't solve. That certainty is crumbling now. We can no longer go to, some other culture and say, yeah, we were doing things better than you guys, because look how successful we are. Now the crises that are invading our lives are undeniable. And they're bringing us to humility, slowly but surely. They're bringing us to humility. Our stories are breaking down, and everything built on the stories is breaking down. All of our institutions are built on these stories. They're embedded in these stories. So, for example, the story of well-being comes through controlling the other. Well, that's written into our criminal justice system. It's also into our written into our medical system. It's a war of body against invader, against pathogen. It's a system of controlling hormone levels, cutting out body parts, that kind of thing. It's in our educational system. It's certainly in our political system, in U.S. foreign policy, which is about walling off, destroying, and otherwise controlling the terrorists or whoever else is out there, whatever other enemy that we can identify. And it even infiltrates religion and spirituality too, where first you identify a bad guy and then you conquer the bad guy, which is actually a recipe for despair. Like I said before, the bad guys, the military, industrial, et cetera, complex, they have a lot more power, a lot more force at their disposal than we do. So, as everyone knows, the new story, the new and ancient story, gives different answers to that question, who are you? No longer a separate self in a universe of other, but an interconnected, interexistent, interbeing. So that for the separate self, what happens to you doesn't have to affect me. If you suffer some misfortune, then, well, too bad for you. If this rainforest suffers some destruction, well, I can, source my products from somewhere else. If some country is devastated by war, then that needn't affect us, because we can, build a wall around that country. We can keep them out. And if they try to do anything, we can bomb them. Because we're separate. But as we evolve into the story of interbeing, we understand that what happens to anything is also happening to ourselves. And that we can't keep it out. So violence abroad, no matter how careful we are, and I see this every time I go through customs, like this huge institution that's dedicated toward keeping the bad people out. We can try as hard as we like, but the violence abroad is going to be mirrored as domestic violence. In our cities and even in our own homes. It gets in under the fortress walls. Ecocide, damaging the health of the planet, comes into our lives as the deterioration of our own health. It's unavoidable. And so we're learning this the hard way, I guess you could say. I'm starting to get the feeling I'm lecturing here and being preachy. So I'm just going to pause for a second. I know it's been a long day. Well, let's finish that little story and tell you another one. And then we'll play a little game. So I told this young woman this story and this metaphor, this image of climbing one generation after another after another. And I said, and now we're almost there. And she was a generation younger than me. I said, your generation, you're the ones who are reaching over the lip of that cliff and pulling each other into the golden land. My generation, we can't quite make it. We've got too many habits of separation. We can't make it under our own power. But I said, do me a favor, will you? When you pull yourself up over that cliff, can you reach your hand down and pull my generation up with you? You can look at all 12 areas of the wheel of co-creation as expressions of this new and ancient story of interbeing. Almost anything that is holistic or alternative or radical in some way taps into this new and ancient mythology. I could just pick any random example, permaculture, for example. No longer is it about dominating nature and maximizing what we can extract from it. But it understands that we have to give to the land in order to receive to the land. And that the health of the soil is our health as well. And that we can, humans and soil and animals and plants and insects, we're all part of a larger emergence that we seek to listen to rather than to impose. So as we build the new world, we're not imposing something onto reality. This isn't like an intensified version of the same technological program that we've had for thousands of years. It starts with listening. What is the dream of the land? What wants to be born? What can we contribute to that's beyond ourselves? And that's the only by tapping into a power beyond our understanding of causality, beyond the linear mechanistic understanding of cause and effect. Only by doing that can we actually achieve the things we want to achieve. Because the cynic, the skeptic, and the realist says it's impossible. You don't know how to get from point A to point B. And according to everything that we've been told about how change happens and how the world works, it is impossible. You don't have enough money to do it. You don't have enough political power to do it. You don't have the media concentration. You don't have any of this stuff. How are you going to do it? If it requires overcoming your enemies, it's impossible. But when you understand that your enemies, that everything that is beautiful in you is in them as well, and that everything that seems ugly about them can be healed inside you as well, then there's hope. Because you can look at the motorcycle thug, or the corporate CEO or the banker or the politician or anybody, and you can say, I know who you really are. You're a beautiful person who cares deeply and is doing his best. And how can I what story are you living in? What life experience have you had that causes you to do the things that you do? And how can I change that? How can I invite you into a new story? How can I disrupt the story that you're in? And then there's hope. A guy who wrote me from Australia, I met him, and he told me a story. He had been, some years back, had been part of an anti-fracking campaign. And it wasn't going well. They had tried everything to stop this big fracking project. Legal challenges, petitions, lobbying, and now it was time for direct action, and so they were occupying the site and physically preventing the machines from drilling. And there were a lot of indigenous involved in it, and they had this big encampment, and they heard that the government was amassing a force of 850 heavily armed riot police that were going to invade the encampment, clear them out, and there was nothing they could do about it. And so they decided that they weren't going to fight it. Instead, they were going to have a party, a big festival, a celebration. So they got out, they brought in the didgeridoos and the clapping sticks, and they made this gigantic art installation that was visible from the sky, and it would be seen because there were media drones coming in to film the battle that was going to happen. And they just started having a great time, dancing, and they just gave up the fight. And a strange thing happened. The government became paralyzed. The police called off the invasion because they were all prepared to battle environmental extremists who were disobeying the law, but their story didn't have room for breaking up an indigenous party, an indigenous celebration. They were unable to do anything, and in the end, the fracking company got investigated by the government for corruption. And in the end, fracking was banned from that state in Australia. I believe it was New South Wales. And afterwards, one of the indigenous elders went up to my friend, and she was just crying tears of gratitude. And she said, I've seen this happen again and again and again in my lifetime. These protests to try to protect our land. I know what happens. All the black fellows get arrested, half the white fellows get arrested, and the project continues as planned. And this time it was different, and the reason was because you let go of conflict. And that allowed the spirit of the land to come in. And when that happens, you cannot lose. But it requires letting go of control. Why? Why can't the spirit of the land operate when you're trying to control every variable? Because you're living in a story in which the results are up to you and are conditioned by how much force you can exercise. In the old story, change happens through the application of a force on a mass. That's Newtonian physics. And quantum physics doesn't work like that. In quantum physics, things just happen, acausally. Why does this uranium atom decay and that one doesn't? Why? There's no deeper answer. An indigenous person understands why. It's because this one chose to and that one didn't. Because they're unique individuals, just like everything else in the universe. So the old story is breaking down even within science. And whether it's quantum mechanics or systems theory or nonlinear dynamics, or the new biology, epigenetics, it's breaking down in every realm. So, I'd like to play a little game with you here. I've given you kind of a condensed version of what I talk about. But before I do that, I just want to ask you to connect with an experience that you've had that showed you or confirmed in you that a more beautiful world is possible. An experience that didn't fit into normal as it was told to you, and that felt real. Maybe it was an experience of flow, of effortless cooperation in a group where everybody was doing just the right thing at just the right time, and whatever was needed showed up at the right moment. Maybe it was an experience of deep synchronicity that happened in your life when everything fell apart and you didn't know how to get from point A to point B. And here you were in an unfamiliar city, and this deeper intelligence manifested, and you felt, I'm not alone in this. Or maybe it was an experience of deep intimacy, of connection with another person or with nature, or perhaps a physical healing that was medically considered impossible, or an experience of forgiveness that violated the laws of human nature as you had known them, or of generosity that said the world could be like this. We could build a reality on this. This is what wants to happen. And it's just this close. Just a shift of perception away. And the underlying abundance and love could become the new normal. An experience like that. Bring it into your awareness. If we had more time, I would have you share this story with each other. But if we do that, we won't have time for a game. So instead, just share it non-verbally. Turn to somebody silently, look them in the eye, touch their hand in the of this experience. Each one of these experiences is that glimpse, that facet of the jewel coming through the mist that's gathering us all together. So, a couple of years ago, I was invited to speak at a very mainstream event in London called the Sunday Papers. And they had, instead of reading the paper, you go to this event and there's a speaker representing the politics section and a speaker representing business and a speaker representing sports and so on. And I'd been asked to speak to represent the business section. So even though I denied being a social entrepreneur, my ideas about business, are in line with the concept of social enterprise, that it is going to shift into service, where profit is secondary. But how do I present my ideas on economics to a very mainstream audience? I thought, okay, I'll pretend that I'm from the future. That might be a way to get under their defenses. So I go in there and I'm like, I'm so happy to be here on the 100th anniversary of your event, the year 2113, and everyone's looking confused. And I said, what year is it? 2013. Oh man, that explains it. I walked into this funny phone booth and I walked out and everything was different. Doctor Who reference. Okay. Anyway, so then I'm like, okay, but let me tell you what business is like in the year 2113. So I had 20 minutes, I spoke, and I thought it worked pretty well, And then afterwards, there was a coffee break, and people began to come up and ask me questions. And a weird thing happened. In all earnestness, they asked me questions as if I really were from the future. Like, Charles, tell me, is there still war in the year 2113? Is there still marriage, or is it polyamory? Like all these questions. Are there still prisons? And I thought, I was born in Michigan in the year 1967, but let's just go with it. So I stayed in character, and I really felt like I had access to these answers. I felt like I really was from the future. And then later, my mind got a hold of this. And I thought, okay, well, let's play with the idea that in the future, they've developed a technology to communicate with the past. The way it works is that the person in the future and the person in the past go into an identical state of meditation, and a connection is formed. And once that connection is formed, they can communicate. We're going to do that. The question is, which future are you going to speak from? Because there are many possible futures. Part of our old story is that reality is this objective thing outside of ourselves. But actually, reality is more of a superposition of possibilities. And we're going to pick the one that is the most beautiful future that you can imagine, realistically, that doesn't feel like a fantasy. You're going to pick the one that little glimpse that you had, that experience you connected to. You're going to pick the one that promises. That's the one. Because you can feel its possibility. Maybe not its certainty. Maybe that vision comes with doubt, comes with pain, comes with grief. That's okay, because you can feel its reality too. It doesn't feel like a fantasy. So, we're going to split the room into people from the past and people from the future. And then we'll switch. So decide who's going to be your partner, maybe the person who you connected with. And if you don't have a partner, raise your hand and find somebody who has their hand raised. Okay, and then find them in the room, sit next to them. All right. Now, just a minute. There's many more instructions here. More instructions. All right. So, the person sitting closest to that wall over there, on your left, that person will start by being from our time. So, those from our time, I want you to really take this seriously. The more seriously you take this, the better the technology will work. So, imagine like a time machine appears right now and someone does step out from the future. What are you going to ask them? What are you curious about? What do you want to know the most? What do you want to say to them? Really, think about that. And while you think about that, I'm going to lead your partners in a little guided meditation to connect with some people in the future. So, people on the right, close your eyes. People on the left, ignore me. People on the right, close your eyes. And enjoy just half a minute of silence, tuning into the silence underneath the noises. Knowing that 200 years from now or more, a kindred spirit is doing the same. The same silence. And you sense this person. Connecting. Sitting now in that person's seat. Becoming one. Looking back at the past. Way, way back to the year they called 2015. A year when it looked like we might not make it. When it looked very dark. We're going to go back to that year. And each of us is going to meet somebody, one of your ancestors, from that time. And your ancestor will ask you questions. Maybe you won't have all the answers. But one thing you will know is that we made it. Keep in mind that this person has no way of knowing just how beautiful the world became. Had no way of knowing that in our time we can drink without fear from any stream. The water is pure and the air is pure. And that we hear children's laughter and bird songs more than we hear machines. They had no way of knowing that we'd make it. In half a minute, you'll open your eyes and you'll see your ancestor coming to them with a feeling of gratitude because it was their courage that enabled our world to be born. I will count backwards from 5. When I get to 1, open your eyes and begin the conversation. 5, 4, 3, coming back to the year 2015, 2, visiting, 1.
Like a telepathic. What? And it's all mine. I forget that. That may still be happening. But I guess there's a lot more consciousness around it. Especially because I felt like the whole time she was there, I was like people with me. And we didn't have to, I didn't even have to look. I just thought. Yeah. Now that's good. Okay, so we've all that. Yeah. And so that's what's happening. I saw no technology at all. I saw like grass, sky, and it was very simple. Is there an ongoing dialogue? No, I wouldn't say there was. It was just like there were people that showed and there was
Okay. Unfortunately, this technology only lasts for a few minutes, and maybe you can already feel maybe there's just, I've opened Pandora's box. Yes, well, guess what? This connection, if you do this again and again and again, the connection will get stronger and stronger until you begin to question whether it's a game or whether there actually is a technology in the future that communicates with the past, whatever actually means these days. So let's reverse roles now. Just give yourself a little shake, you know? Yeah. Jump up and down, take off your clothes. Just kidding, just kidding. Maybe in this crowd that needs a disclaimer, just kidding, otherwise people will actually do it. All right. So now, those of you who were from the future, now tap into your. So if you were from the future now, so those of you on the right side of the partnership, now you're going to tap into your feelings of doubt, anxiety, and curiosity. Maybe there's just a little pinprick of doubt. I know I have this voice of doubt that speaks to me every day. When I get these visions and have these experiences, they're often followed by pain and grief, that things aren't like this now, or that I've lived so much of my life in a world that wasn't that beautiful, so on and so forth. A lot of grief. So we're not going to do a grief process now, but just, you know, if you're going to be asking the questions, what what is the doubt that stirs you? Or maybe just the curiosity, okay? So tap into that and connect with that, and ignore me now as I speak to those on the left side. So close your eyes, those on the left side. And just enjoy a little time of letting go of who you are. And coming into the silence underneath the fan, underneath the noises. And knowing that someone in the future is attending to the same silence, the very same silence, and you're together. Together in the silence. Approaching this kindred spirit. Feeling huge love for this kindred spirit. Closer and closer. Becoming one. Looking back over history. Back to the year they called 2015. Preparing now to journey back to that time. Back to a time when it looked like we might not make it. A time of tremendous suffering of humans and non-humans. A time of despair. And a time of great courage. When people with almost no hope did it anyway. Your ancestors, the courageous ones. And you'll carry this feeling of gratitude with you as you journey to the past. And you'll have a conversation with one of your ancestors. And whatever they ask you, listen also to the question behind the question. However you answer, it will carry the energy of what you know. That you know we made it. That you know how beautiful the world will become thanks to them. Carry that knowing with you as I count backwards from 5. And when I get to 1, you'll open your eyes. You'll see your ancestor next to you, and you'll have a conversation. 5. 4. Traveling to the past. 3. In gratitude. 2. 1. Okay, ask one more question if you have one more that you need to ask. Okay. All right. So come back to the present. No. All right. Okay, so I'm going to tell you your bedtime story in a minute here, but let's just first have just a couple reflections on that process. Does anyone have anything that's really coming to them to share about that experience? Did you cry? In a good way, I hope, yes. Yeah. Anyone else? Just any? Yeah. 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 She said the stories I made up are absolutely true. Yeah. Yeah. Full of hope. Yeah. You didn't feel like you were making stuff up, did you? No. No. Yeah. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, they're still perfecting this technology. It's a bit sporadic. Usually it works, though. Okay, one more. Yeah. Yeah. 200 years is not that far in the future. I mean, imagine what things are going to be like 30,000 years from now. I mean, this can go really deep. I've led it, in retreats and stuff where people are going so deep that they're channeling healing hand gestures from the future. Like you enter a different reality, and this is part of the old story says the building blocks of reality are things, atoms, particles. But other cosmology said the building blocks of realities are stories. And that many cultures believe that if they stopped enacting the ritual of the creation of the world, reenacting that story of the creation's myth, then the world would fall apart. That their stories and their rituals and their ceremonies held the fabric of reality together. Our story says that's nonsense, but guess what? When the missionaries and the plantations and stuff come in there and take away their stories, their world does fall apart. And now, as our mythology is eroding from the inside, our reality is falling apart too. And many people on a personal level go through this as well. When the story of you no longer works, it feels like reality is falling apart as well. You don't even know it's real anymore. When you have that health crisis or that marital crisis or that money crisis or whatever, it's like you don't know who you are anymore. You don't know what's real anymore. Anyway, let me tell you a bedtime story. This will only take 5 minutes. I know people are tired. So we practice a technology from 200 years in the future, but several thousand years from the future, they developed an even more powerful technology. I know this because they came and told us about that. And this technology allows you not only to communicate with the past, but to actually travel to the past and live a life in the past. So, many thousands of years in the future, a certain tribe, because different tribes were in charge of different, or will be in charge of different, you might call them technologies. A tribe gathered and said, it's come to our attention that there is a serious crisis. The timeline that leads to our beautiful world is under threat. It might disappear, leaving us stranded in the realms of possibility. We need to go back and repair that timeline. We need volunteers to go back to the past, to the 20th and 21st century, where our timeline is in danger of extinction. We need volunteers to go back to that time and repair it and help the planet make the transition to the timeline that leads to our beautiful world. We need emissaries back into the past. And we're not asking a small thing of you, because when you go into this trance and you will be born, you will experience an entire lifetime in the past. You will be born into the 20th century. You will experience all of the traumas that the 20th century inflicts upon human beings. You will forget all the details about where you came from. You will forget your name. You will forget your language. You will forget everything. The only thing that you will be born with is this knowing that you are here on a mission, but you won't even be sure what the mission is until that's awakened to you. So we're asking a big thing of you. Any volunteers? Well, some people were raising their hands, but not enough. And one woman said, I would like to volunteer, but I'm a little concerned. What happens if I'm born into the past and I'm so traumatized by that past that I forget my mission, and I instead get caught up in this timeline going towards some other terrible world, and I have lifetime after lifetime after lifetime in that timeline of separation, and I never get back to this world. What happens if I get lost in separation? I just don't have a confidence that I'm going to be able to remember. And the chief technologist shaman said, I forgot to mention that. We've thought of that possibility, and so I'll tell you, we will send you help. We can't send you that much help, but we will send you help. In those moments where you are truly in danger of losing your way, being lost in separation, we will send you help in the form of some event, some encounter that will awaken in you or reawaken the memory of where you came from and why you're here. And you'll get another kind of help too. Sometimes you will run into somebody else from our same tribe. And when you meet them and look into their eyes, you will each remind each other of why you're here. You will recognize them. You will recognize them. And occasionally, many of you will gather in one place. And those gatherings will crystallize that knowing in you so that you will never truly forget it again. After that explanation, many, many people volunteered. And they stood in a circle, and the last thing that they knew was the shaman blowing smoke in their face. And here we are. And in truth, everybody is from a tribe like ours, all converging to make this transition. So thank you, and I will see you in the morning.